guys, Miss Jackson here. I was thinking about how when I start these videos, so often if I'm reading you a book, I say these words. This is one of my favorite books. And except maybe Wonky Donkey. I don't think I said that about Wonky Donkey, but I've said it about a lot of books. And I bet you don't even believe me anymore. And now I'm going to say this to you. This is my very most favorite book of all times. Yep. Do you have a book at your house that maybe you ask to have it read to you over and over and over and over again, like every single night, and your family's kind of tired of it? This is that book from my childhood. My sisters are all a lot older than me, and so I would ask them to read this to me, and my mommy and my daddy. It's called The Little House by Virginia Lee Burton, and it just has always fascinated me. You see the little picture? And a few years ago, I realized that the house that I live in looks like this house. Do you think I purposely did that? I didn't know I was doing it. But I did. And you know, I lost my copy of my book from my childhood, and I found this one when I was pregnant with my son 22 years ago at an antique store. Antique stores are where old things are. So it's an old book. The Little House. Once upon a time, there was a little house way out in the country. She was a pretty little house, and she was strong and well built. The man who built her so well said, "This little house shall never be sold for gold or silver, and she will live to see our great-great-grandchildren's great-great-grandchildren living in her." See, it's up on a hill. And those pretty little trees, and there's the man saying that. The little house was very happy as she sat on the hill and watched the countryside around her. She watched the sun rise in the morning, and she watched the sun set in the evening. Day followed day, each one a little different from the one before, but the little house stayed just the same. Oh, and this picture has some little cows. Do you see that? And a barn. In the nights, she watched the moon grow from a thin new moon to a full moon, and then back again to a thin old moon. And when there was no moon, she watched the stars way off in the distance. She could see the lights of the city. The little house was curious about the city and wondered what would it be like to live there. Time passed quickly for the little house as she watched the countryside slowly change with the seasons. In the spring, when the days grew longer and the sun warmer, she waited for the first robin to return from the south. She watched the grass turn green. She watched the buds on the trees swell and the apple trees burst into blossom. She watched the children playing in the brook. And I just loved these pictures. I still do. See these little bitty kids playing in the brook and the apple blossoms. And you know I have apple trees in my yard, just like the little house's yard. And look, it's a carriage because they don't have cars yet. And there's horses and cows, and the people are working their land because it's the old days. They're having their farm work. And that was springtime, which is what we're in right now, okay? In the long summer days, that's coming next when it gets hot and we go swimming a lot. She sat in the sun and watched the trees cover themselves with leaves and the white daisies cover the hill. I picked some daisies just 2 days ago. She watched the gardens grow, and she watched the apples turn red and ripen. She watched the children swimming in the pool. Look, the little naked kids. Yep. They're swimming in that pool. And then there's still a carriage. And look, the lady's dressed in old-fashioned old-fashioned fancy clothes and has a parasol. A parasol keeps the sun off their face so they stay lily white like Miss Jackson. In the fall, when the days grew shorter and the nights colder, she watched the first frost turn the leaves to bright yellow and orange and red. She watched the harvest gathered and the apples picked. She watched the children going back to school. There's the kids going to school. And look how colors have changed, because now it's fall. Fall starts in September. And October and November is fall. In the winter, when the nights were long and the days short and the countryside covered with snow, she watched the children coasting and skating. Year followed year. The apple trees grew old and the new ones were planted. The children grew up and went away to the city, and now at night the lights of the city seemed brighter and closer. So here's the kids skating in the pond and building a snowman and shoveling, and they're in a sleigh. Do you see that? Isn't that pretty? I know we don't really have that kind of snow in Oklahoma. One day, the little house was surprised to see a horseless carriage. What is a horseless carriage, do you think? A carriage that goes without any horses is a car. I don't have the picture of it, but yes, a car. Okay? A horseless carriage coming down the winding country road. Pretty soon there were more of them on the road and fewer carriages pulled by horses. Pretty soon along came some surveyors and surveyed a line in front of the little house. Pretty soon along came a steam shovel and dug a road through the hill covered with daisies. Then some trucks came and dumped big stones on the road. Then some trucks with little stones, and then some trucks with tar and sand. And finally a steamroller came and rolled it all smooth, and the road was done. What is going on, do you think? Everything is changing for the little house. Now the little house watched the trucks and automobiles going back and forth to the city. Gasoline stations, roadside stands, and small houses followed the new road. Everyone and everything moved much faster now than ever before. There's a picture of a little old car. And look at all those houses coming, and all this traffic. More roads were made, and the countryside was divided into lots. More houses and bigger houses, apartment houses and tenement houses, schools, stores, and garages spread over the land and crowded around the little house. No one wanted to live in her and take care of her anymore. She couldn't be sold for gold or silver. So she just stayed there and watched. I get kind of choked up, a little bit sad over this. Yep. Now it was not so quiet and peaceful at night. Now the lights of the city were bright and very close, and the street lights shone all night. This must be living in the city, thought the little house, and didn't know whether she liked it or not. She missed the fields of daisies and the apple trees dancing in the moonlight. I would miss that too. Pretty soon there were trolley cars going back and forth in front of the little house. They went back and forth all day and part of the night. Everyone seemed to be very busy, and everyone seemed to be in a hurry. We don't have trolley cars really, but there they are, because this was a long time ago. Pretty soon there was an elevated train going back and forth above the little house. The air was filled with dust and smoke, and the noise was so loud that it shook the little house. Now she couldn't tell when spring came, or summer, or fall, or winter. It all seemed about the same. Pretty soon there was a subway going back and forth underneath the little house. She couldn't see it, but she could feel it and hear it. People were moving faster and faster. No one noticed the little house anymore. They hurried by without a glance. So see, now it's underneath the ground too. So there's people traveling here, and here, and here. And she's right in the middle. Pretty soon, they tore down the apartment houses and tenement houses around the little house and started digging big cellars, one on each side. The steam shovels dug down 3 stories on one side and 4 stories on the other side. Pretty soon they started to building up. They built up 25 stories on one side and 35 stories on the other. Used to call those skyscrapers because they scraped the sky. It's very busy pictures, lots of things to look at. Now the little house only saw the sun at noon and didn't see the moon or stars at night at all because the lights of the city were too bright. She didn't like living in the city. At night she used to dream of the country and the fields of daisies and the apple trees dancing in the moonlight. The little house was very sad and lonely. Her paint was cracked and dirty. Her windows were broken and her shutters hung crookedly. She looked shabby, though she was just as good a house as ever underneath. Now, I don't know how I can feel so much emotions about a house, but I do. I love this little house. Then one fine morning in spring, along came the great-great-granddaughter of the man who built the little house so well. She saw the shabby little house, but she didn't hurry by. There was something about the little house that made her stop and look again. She said to her husband, "That little house looks just like the little house my grandmother lived in when she was a little girl, only that little house was way out in the country on a hill covered with daisies and apple trees growing around." Ooh, what do you think's gonna happen? Can you guess? What do you think this great-great-granddaughter is going to do now that she has found the house? They found out it was the very same house, so they went to the movers to see if the little house could be moved. The movers looked the little house all over and said, "Sure, this house is as good as ever. She's built so well, we could move her anywhere." So they jacked up the little house and put her on wheels. Traffic was held up for hours as they slowly moved her out of the city. Isn't that cool? Look at that little house. She's going for a ride. At first the little house was frightened, but after she got used to it, she rather liked it. They rolled along the big road and they rolled along the little roads till they were way out in the country. When the little house saw the green grass and heard the birds singing, she didn't feel sad anymore. She went along and along, but they didn't seem to find just the right place. They tried the little house here and they tried her there. Finally they saw a little hill in the middle of a field and apple trees growing around. "There," said the great-great-granddaughter, "that's just the place." "Yes, it is," said the little house to herself. A cellar was dug on top of the hill, and slowly they moved the house from the road to the hill. A cellar is also called a basement, and we don't usually have basements here in Oklahoma, but in other states they do have basements. The windows and shutters were fixed, and once again they painted her a lovely shade of pink. As the little house settled down on her new foundations, she smiled happily. Once again she could watch the sun and moon and stars. Once again she could watch spring and summer and fall and winter come and go. Once again she was lived in and taken care of. Oh, it's so pretty. It's so sweet. My house was a mess when I got it, and I fixed it up as best I could. I'm not really a contractor or a builder, but I did pretty good, and I love my little house, and I have my apple trees, and I see the sun and the moon and the seasons come and go, and just like the little house, and she looks like she's smiling, doesn't she? Never again would she be curious about the city. Never again would she want to live there. The stars twinkled above her. A new moon was coming up. It was spring, and all was quiet and peaceful in the country. And you know Miss Jackson loves to live in the country, just like the little house does. I've lived in the city before, and it was nice. It had advantages, but I like the country. Did you like it? I hope so. I know it was kind of a long book, and I know it was about a house instead of a horse or a person or a kitty cat or something interesting like that. But I hope you enjoyed it. I love you and I miss you. I hope you are having a beautiful day. I'm ready to teach class again and actually see kids, but I hope you're liking these little videos that I'm making. Hugs and kisses.